Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the news editor for the Cradle, and as usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and editor and columnist for the Cradle, Sharmeen Narwani. And as usual, before we start our program, we just want to remind you to leave a like, to share this video, to subscribe to our channel, to find us on our other social media platforms, and more importantly, to please check out our Patreon, where you can become a direct supporter of the Cradle. So today we start many news really on the news cycle of the past several days, and even news for us here at the Cradle, but I will get into that in a bit. But main thing happening over the past few days, since diplomacy has completely collapsed in the terms of the Iran nuclear talks and ceasefire talks for the Gaza Strip, where food aid has completely ended. There's really no more food in the strip. 9 weeks into an Israeli blockade that is essentially starving the population. At this point, you're talking around 60 people have died due to starvation. As far as the nuclear talks, Donald Trump, in an interview yesterday, he says he's demanding the full disarmament of Iran's nuclear program, which we know is possibly the main red line in what was up to a few days ago described as positive talks that were making progress. Last week, it seemed, after Oman announced that they would delay the next round of talks, the U.S. came out and said, we never agreed to a new round of talks. And then you had the firing or removal, I guess, of Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, being replaced by war hawk Marco Rubio. Not that Waltz wasn't a hawk, right? But remember, there was a moment there in which they were saying, oh, it's actually going to be Steve Witkoff, who's been leading the diplomatic efforts with Iran to replace Waltz. Is not. Now it's Marco Rubio. Now Trump is out on TV saying these things about nuclear disarmament. Iran is, has maintained its position from the very beginning, which is we need a new deal that respects the Iranian Republic as much as, is being asked of us. So having said that, before, as I said, diplomacy also in the Gaza ceasefire, because this morning, before we start recording, the Israeli Security Cabinet unanimously approved the conquest of Gaza and the promotion of the voluntary migrations of Palestinians. What does that mean? Settlement, occupation, and forced displacement of the native population. Again, something that is not really going to go well in ceasefire talks, either with the mediators, not with the other side. In any case, I want to get your thoughts, your guys' thoughts on, this, I guess, new day, so to speak, although it kind of feels like, we're just back to the beginning again.
I mean, Trump's juggling a lot of balls, I have to say. I don't know quite what the plan is. I don't see how he can travel to the Gulf countries, to Saudi Arabia, that has, very, very clearly said that there will be no normalization with Israel unless there's a Palestinian state. To the UAE, which is, friends with Israel, has no issue with its policies, it seems. And then to Qatar, which is HQ, headquarters for the U.S. Central Command in the region, but is a natural supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood, of which Hamas is an offshoot, right? And has been a great supporter and funder of Palestinians in Gaza, So how does he plan to go? I think it's May 17th or something, to the region on his Persian Gulf tour, having let the Israelis have their way, break the ceasefire, first of all, and have their way with Gaza, starving the populations there and not allowing aid in. On the other hand, in reference to you're quoting Trump on how Iran has to dismantle its nuclear program. Really, it's kind of crazy. We have such contrasting signals from him and his administration. There was a Washington Post article, was it yesterday, maybe day before, about Mike Waltz's sacking. That in fact, while the Signal Gate may have been the last straw, that there were already talks about this because Trump and his team were very upset that Mike Waltz had gone before the Oval Office visit in February of Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, before his visit with Trump in the Oval Office, he had met with him, and I guess the two had worked on, you know, on a mutual message about going to war with Iran. And the view by some of the administration was that Wolf was trying to tip the scales in favor of war, which I think Trump is getting some serious pushback on from his MAGA crowd by saying, "Wait, what happened? You know, you were anti-war, and now you're like you're bombing Yemen, you're threatening Iran, etc." And as the Washington Post says, and this is a quote by a Trump advisor to the Washington Post. If Jim Baker, who was, of course, George W. Bush's Secretary of State, right? If Jim Baker was doing a side deal with the Saudis to subvert Bush, you'd be fired. You can't do that. You work for the president of your country, not a president of another country. And that's a pretty strong thing to say, you know. So I often voice here that, you know, at some point Netanyahu and Trump are going to butt heads. You know, we're seeing signs of that. I don't know if it'll ever be made public, but we're definitely seeing signs of it. What Netanyahu is doing in Gaza is upsetting Trump's trip to the Persian Gulf. What he did behind Trump's back with Trump's national security advisor has upset Trump. You know, but yet Trump is, you know, is going sort of counterintuitively, sending out opposite messages, while his actions sometimes are showing another side of things. So it's really hard to interpret.
I think, you know, we're seeing exactly the same thing happen with the tariffs, for example, right? Which one day is one thing, the next day is the other thing. I want to say in the Washington Post, they talk about Waltz having engaged in intense coordination with Netanyahu about an operation against Iran. So that seemed to really, you know, not gone the way they wanted. You mentioned Yemen, and I do want us to comment on this, especially I want to hear Karim's take on this, because yesterday the Yemeni army imposes a blockade on Israeli airports, announces a blockade on Israeli airports, and after launching a ballistic hypersonic missile that manages to reach Ben Gurion Airport, sending settlers into a panic, into shelters, and you know, canceling flights.
Was it 3 million settlers?
I didn't see the number, but I'm sure it was like it's usually, because, you know, this is in the middle of Tel Aviv essentially, or close to the main center of it. In any case, the big question, I guess, that is still like in the minds of not many in the occupation state is how did this missile get past the Iron Dome and the USS THAAD? Remember that they have like 2 THAAD batteries at the United States, and not just that, right? Also the ships in the Red Sea. All of that, Yemen manages to get one through, creates this crater. I'm sure we'll put the video of this by Ben Gurion Airport. So what do you make of this, Karim? And also, what do you make of what Israel has threatened, which is that they're going to lift all restrictions against Yemen?
Yeah, of course, what happened is very impressive. As you said, they bypassed many radars and defense systems. And we should not forget Saudi Arabia also. Additionally to the U.S. fleet in the Red Sea, and we have the Western bases in Djibouti, and of course Jordan and Israel, and all of these things together. This missile managed to hit Tel Aviv or surrounding area, and as Sharmin said, I'm sure like 1 or 2 million panicked. And the goal of this is not to kill Israelis, is like to affect Israel's economy, and to halt Ben Gurion Airport, which is the main airport in Israel, which will pressure Netanyahu and his cabinet furthermore to stop the war or the genocide in Gaza. And this also shows us that the Yemenis currently and the past year they took on their own to produce and to manufacture such missiles, because Yemen historically it doesn't need such weapons, and they didn't have such weapons. They did this solely to aid Gaza against the genocide that's happening. And what I hate in the in Western media, and even in Arabian media, and even in media that are with the resistance and support Palestine, they often mention Iran. And yesterday I read more than one article saying, and even the Americans said, no, Iran should stop selling technology or smuggling weapons to Yemen. I think it's time to give the Yemenis the credit. They are manufacturing these missiles, and they have now the capability of doing so. And time will tell us. Time will tell us. Maybe yesterday one missile hit, the next day maybe more than one missile will hit, and we'll see more missiles hitting Tel Aviv. That's what I think will happen.
There's been more than 1,300 U.S. attacks on Yemen thus far. And this missile marked the 70th missile or thereabouts that Yemen has launched that has hit targets inside Israel. I think, it will have a great, of course, Ben Gurion Airport is the major hub, right? Traveling hub, as Kenny mentioned. But I think, and I think 10 international airlines canceled flights to Ben Gurion. The Yemenis have also now promised that they will continue to intermittently target Ben Gurion Airport in future attacks. Okay, so what does that do to confidence of international airlines for the long term? Just take a second one to hit its target for many airlines to cancel, at least for the foreseeable future, flights to Tel Aviv. But I think more importantly is the psychological impact. The Israelis have acted like the big regional war is over. They have emerged victorious. Their enemies have been defeated. It's so not true. Its
We're
enemies
shaping up the new Middle East.
Yeah, its enemies simply have chosen not to act now. Okay? If, for instance, if this one missile had such an impact, imagine if Iran did in fact launch its, vaunted Operation True Promise 3. Just for our viewers to know, Karim and I are both in Tehran right now. It's Karim's first trip here. And maybe at the end of the podcast, I'll give you some extremely hilarious stories about Karim entering Iran and how he responded to various things, because it is truly funny. But in Iran, people keep talking. There's a media festival for international journalists. So I think our viewers will have heard of many of the ones who have arrived to Tehran the last few days. Our very own columnist Pepe Escobar is here. Alistair Crook is here. Names are escaping me right now, but it just such a great lineup of people. And honestly, I come to these things because I get to finally meet the journalists I admire, and people who, maybe we've mutually followed for many years on social media and via emails and WhatsApps, but have never actually met. So it's been absolutely fantastic. But one of the questions that keep coming up in different fora where either we're talking to audiences or listening to others speak is what happened to Operation True Promise 3. It's very clear that Iran is fully capable of launching that. Why it doesn't is, the question on everyone's mind. But look at what one Yemeni missile did, right? To sort of, completely reverse this notion of any victory for Israelis who had been chest thumping for a good few months. And I think, if there is a provocation against Iran and Iran does respond, you basically rewind the whole war back to where we were over 6 months ago, when we were looking at, maybe a multi-front attack on Israel, because Israel, Netanyahu is constantly telling us he's fighting a 7-front war. Well, if just a few of those fronts responded in a coordinated way with missiles, what would the Israeli reaction be there? I think they'd be quite shocked. The Israelis would be shocked because they really have bought into this idea that they've emerged completely victorious, especially after Nasrallah's death and Syria's fall.
Yeah. So something interesting too is last week The Intercept came out with this report that talked about that the U.S. Central Command, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and the White House have all refused release information on how many casualties the U.S. Army has incurred in this war against Yemen, which, as you said, over 1,300 attacks since March, since the time when Israel violates the ceasefire in Gaza. And then, honestly, who knows how many attacks since Biden starts this war, right? Yemen, again, being the target of these attacks for more than a year. To very little success, and the Yemeni attacks are pretty fierce, as we have heard already throughout the past year, including, when the U.S. drops these F-18 in the sea because they're trying to evade a Yemeni attack. So there's absolutely no numbers of how many casualties, how many traumatic brain injuries, as they like to always report on in Yemen. But I think we're gonna see probably an overreaction, I would say, from the Israelis, as we are wont to do, right? Last time they attacked Yemen, they blew up the port of Hodeida, these huge fuel tanks. I'm sure they're going to do something probably as horrific, if not more, this time. But the Yemenis don't seem to be too fazed by the threats.
Not
They are
at
very
all.
determined.
Not at
Yeah.
all. I think it's surprising to so many, but really it's not surprising to those of us who, report on West Asia and have done since October 7th. The Yemenis show no fear, as Western commanders of various European militaries have told us time and time again in news reports. So they can hit as much as they want in Yemen. One more hit Ben Gurion Airport, and it's just back to where they started the Israelis. So very interesting times, And by the way, we're going to have an article out next week. Not next week, this week. And it's about the clash of interests between Israel and China. And
very interesting.
It is very interesting because, there's the international IMEC, the Middle East corridor, right? That from India through some Persian Gulf states, through Jordan and into Israel, into Haifa, right? And of course, this intends to undermine, by connecting the Persian Gulf to Europe, it intends to undermine China's Belt and Road Initiative, right? Which is essentially to connect Asia and obviously West Asia, because that is the landmass between Asia and Europe, to connect Asia to Europe. The other thing is that the Americans are working in lockstep with the Israelis to stop Yemen, to take over the waterways, to impose their hegemony back on the waterways of the Persian Gulf and around the area. And that's actually, China relies greatly on Persian Gulf oil and gas to fuel its massive economic engine. And for the Americans to sort of reestablish hegemony in those waters with Israel's help, this being an Israeli interest, also again puts the Chinese, Beijing, at odds with Tel Aviv. So in a variety of spheres, this is happening. Now, it's not just the Persian Gulf and those waterways, but the Horn of Africa that is critical to China. The Horn of Africa is, of course, the Trump Israeli project of recognizing Somaliland, creating military bases there. Maybe the UAE, establishing a military base there because Djibouti is trying to kick the UAE out. Djibouti is also in the Horn of Africa, the only Chinese military base overseas. So the Israelis are going head to head with Chinese interests. And Gaza, by the way, falls within this because it is obviously on the Mediterranean Sea, and it is a key part of the route to Europe. So to take over Gaza and to absolutely have no impediments there, the Israelis have that entire coastline to themselves. Yeah.
I wanted to get you guys' thoughts on something here, since you're in Tehran right now. You're seeing the sights, you're hearing from the people. The threat right now is that, as usual, right, that Yemen is being supported by the government in Iran. That it's Iran's fault that the Yemenis are so capable and so unfazed, and that they will not stop. So they're saying we are not just Netanyahu, right? In this message, he says we are going to also attack Iran. He makes this threat at their time of their choosing, and this also comes after Hexet, right? The defense secretary said the same thing. We're going to attack Iran at the time of our choosing. I just wanted to mention that, Karim. What do you think about this?
I just wanted to say that talks about Iran and Yemen, and it also goes back to the psychology and to influence the Arabs that they are incapable to produce and to manufacture. That's a very important aspect of these talks, and this is part of the Western and the Israeli propaganda against Arab. And Arabs, they are always asleep; they can do anything. And one bunch of Arabs try to do anything, even not fighting Israel, just manufacturing or producing some maybe apps, games. They will fight. They will fight them, and this is part of this propaganda and this ideology that exists since the 40s against Arab. Yeah, and also, of course, the United States, Trump and his Minister of Defense both threatened Iran during the talks, and they said, we are ready to attack Iran. We will take Iran to the Stone Ages, and Iran should learn what happened in Yemen. And what we are doing in Yemen is to show Iran our capabilities. I think, but I think they might bomb Iran. They might not bomb Iran because it's Trump and his cabinet. As you mentioned, as we mentioned at the beginning, he was like the advocate of tariffs, and then he backed down, and then he added tariffs, and then he backed down. Yeah, and Trump is not a stable politician, or he doesn't have a vision. So we, us as analysts, can build on his future actions. Trump is that's why he's is a dangerous man. And I think also we mentioned that the talks now they are halted or there's no talks between the United States and Iran. I think
Essentially, right?
yeah,
That's
yeah. I
where we're
think
at.
I think maybe uh, this will also allow Iran maybe to launch through Promise 3, because I think Iran wanted to continue talks via diplomacy and other means. But I think now it makes no sense if the United States doesn't want to talk. I think Iran should respond. And as Sharmi mentioned, we are in Iran. So as journalists here in Iran, we had the opportunity to go and see the museum of the IRGC, and we met General Ali Bilali, and I had the opportunity to ask him a few questions. And one of the questions was asked by our columnist Pepe Escobar. It was, I think, the most important question, and he told him, now Iran looks bad because where's the Troop Promise 3? You promised us for the Troop Promise 3. And his answer was that Iran is capable, and the IRGC already prepared the plans, and they are just waiting for the political decision to be made. So Iran is ready, and the operation is already is waiting for the green light. And also I asked him a bunch of questions. He ditched some and he answered some. So my question is that I think nowadays that Iran has the capability to deter the Gulf states, the Gulf Arab states, and I don't think they might be used to bomb Iran. But Iran now can be bombed from the sea and can be bombed from Diego Garcia. So his answer, my question is that does Iran currently have the capability or has the capability to bomb a moving vessel? And his answer was so fast. He pointed to a missile that now we will show. He told me this missile is capable of doing this. But he ditched. But he ditched my answer, my question about the 4,000 kilometers range. And I think currently Iran doesn't have, or they don't want to declare that they have the capability to target bases or areas as far as 4,000 kilometers. Because for me, Diego Garcia is like the real threat of Iran. And we mentioned this previously. And also he gave us some information. I think now it's spread in Persian news, but in the West still, I don't think it reached. He said now Iran also has the capability of manufacturing drones that have a range of 3,400 kilometers. And they have now the ability to manufacture drones that can stay in the skies for more than 30 to 34 hours. I think these were important. And also as now our viewers are seeing the views of the missiles, he also told us, when you see this museum, you have to put in mind this museum is around 3 or 4 or 5 years old, because the new capabilities are still not there, and we will not declare them now. So Iran also has new missiles and new capabilities that did not declare. And if you see the videos of the radars, they are very huge. The camera doesn't give them
Mhm.
the
To
right
make
yani, to
justice.
appear. And
Mhm.
also,
Did you ask
there's
them,
their
Karim?
justice.
Did you ask
Yes.
them about if Iranian radars failed during Israel's last attack on Iran? If they failed, or if they were able to circumvent them? Did anyone get to ask that question?
No, we didn't ask this question because when we met him, he talked about the radars, and he talked about the operations that occurred in 2019. And he said that our radars were able to see most, or maybe most or all, the American planes that are in the Iranian skies. And even he said sometimes we know who are inside the airplanes, although they are they are like labeled as stealth by the United States. So I think that's why nobody asked this question. And this answer maybe also your question, that even stealth airplanes and American airplanes can be detected and seen by the IRGC.
But it's because Israel claims it managed to bypass the Iranian radars or take them out. I mean, there's some kind of I don't actually know if I've heard this from Israelis. I literally feel like I have heard Israelis or pro-Israeli commentators talk about the Israelis having breached Iran's radar systems during that attack. And then, of course, there was an Iranian non-response. So one wondered whether that was true or not. But I can see you having completely geeked out at the
Yeah, of
aerospace
course.
system.
Minimum.
Minimum, yeah. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to go with you. I have been there before, and I was insisting, Karim, get up the super early, the crack of dawn when they were taking a tour of journalists to the museum, because it is well worth seeing. And Esteban, you're next.
Yeah.
I wanted
And
to
then,
ask you guys actually. No, go
I
ahead.
mean,
Ah, to come
I'm
to
not,
come to
I'm
Tehran, you
not,
mean? Oh, yeah, of
yeah,
course.
well, not just that. This museum is something really to behold. I'm not, a military expert, but I even geeked out. So yeah, Karim, like whether you're a military person or not, when you go there and see the evolution of Iran's drone program, and they're like, yeah, this is the first drone we ever got our hands on. Like, this is the actual first drone, and reverse engineered that. And then this was the next one we got, and we reverse engineered that. And then as they go down the line, this one we built from scratch. This one we built from scratch. Just get there. You can see how quickly, in compressed time period, the Iranians went from reverse engineering things to like building everything from scratch with their old plans. But the most amazing things is that you can see the Global Hawk, the actual Global Hawk, $200 million plus stealth drone that Iranians downed a few years ago, which shocked the Americans, and the Americans actually were unable or unwilling to respond to that. But that drone actually sits in the Aerospace Museum, so it's something you'll have to be the next one to visit from the Cradle, Esteban, because it's one of those, I
Yeah,
think, eighth wonder.
I'd love to. I'd love to.
and
I'd
there
love
was
to.
also
Sure enough.
and there's also one question that was asked by a colleague of ours, is that are
Hmm.
the missiles safe? Because the question was, we saw and we knew that Hezbollah had many missiles, but they were unable to use them because Israel had a primitive attack and destroy many of these missiles. The question was, is the missiles in Iran and Yemen safe? So his answer was that Iran maybe provides help and maybe building and providing technology for the missiles, but Iran never tells them where or how to store the missiles. Uh,
Yeah,
but he said
but the
that,
Yemenis build it themselves, right? They build their
yeah, yeah,
missiles themselves. Yeah.
but of course they share. I think of course they share technology, but they build them themselves.
Yeah.
Like at this point, they're
So he assured
manufacturing them.
us, yeah, he assured us that the Iranian missiles are safe underground. So just I
But
want to tell.
Esteban, speaking to your comment, which set this off about how Trump is blaming the Iranians for Yemen,
For
okay, for
Yemen, yeah.
Yemeni attacks. It's kind of interesting. I mean, I think Iran is viewed by the Trump administration, who views all global South countries as shitholes. You know, he views Iran as a low-hanging fruit in terms of his lineup of adversaries: China, Russia, Iran, right? So he turns the screws on Iran, but actually what US officials were saying in the last week or so was they were accusing China of providing state-of-the-art, okay, satellite intelligence to Ansar Allah so that they could target US military targets effectively. And this was, I mean, this kind of got lost in the media, didn't it?
A bit,
That's a
yeah, I did.
huge claim. And they just viewed that I think they think that Iranian, you know, because Iran has a space program as well, right? So it sends satellites up into space. And so they obviously assume that Iran doesn't have that level of you know, the
radar technology or satellite, I guess.
capabilities from their satellites in the same way that the Russians and the Chinese have. So the Americans came straight out and accused the Chinese of providing Ansala with you know, targets, US military targets. So then why do they come out instead and blame Iran for Ansarallah when they're actually, you know, quite quietly blaming the Chinese for providing you know, X marks the spot for the Yemeni resistance?
And there's already been talk in U.S. media about how Yemen is quickly becoming a second Vietnam for the United States government, which is, you know, a war that they simply do not know how to fight against an enemy they do not know how to confront. And I think an evidence of this, and I'm sure we can put the tweet that I'm referring right now to as well, is that the USS Truman has over the past several days put distance between itself and the Yemeni coasts. Every day it's a bit further away from the Yemeni coast.
We're still in the region. Another
exactly, we're in the
miles
region,
away.
but yeah, but we need, you know, to give our sailors a bit of a break, you know, give them a few more minutes to react to these non-stop attacks. In any case, we'll be hearing more from you guys, I'm sure, from Tehran. I want us to move on to what's been happening in Syria, because so many things to unwrap there. From Israel bombing the outside of the presidential palace, you know, where Ahmed al-Shara was likely, you know, having a good night's sleep. In the middle of the night, these Israeli jets just dropped some bombs next to it. An intense bombing campaign in support, allegedly, of the Syrian Druze, who have been facing clashes. There have been intense clashes between the Druze clans south of Damascus and the HTS, you know, former Al-Qaeda extremists acting now as Syrian security forces, in a bit of what at one point started to feel like a repeat of what we saw with the Alawites, right? The ethnic cleansing of Alawites. But it seems the Druze have a bit more benefactors, one would say. And there's been already talks, right? They're saying at one point they were saying the clashes stopped. They haven't really all entirely. So there's that, right? Israel coming in for the Druze. And at the same time, and I really want to get your guys' thoughts on this, and is that the United States has continued to withdraw its forces from Syria's main oil fields. They're saying that they have completely left Conoco, the Conoco oil field in Deir ez-Zor in the northeast of Syria, and have only left about 50 soldiers at Al Omar. Now, let's remember just quickly for our listeners that we at the Cradle, in our, you know, since our inception, have been reporting on the looting of Syrian oil by these U.S. forces to fund the administration of the Kurds, right? The autonomous administration of North and East Syria, the Kurdish separatist government. But now the Kurds are kind of like, they made friends, right? They are now friends with Shara and company. They handed them control of Tishrin Dam. The Turks seem to be kind of holding back a bit in the north. Karim, what do you think? What do you think of what's happening with Shara in particular? You know, with this, what's happening with the Druze, and is he getting control back of these oil fields? Is Syria all of a sudden going to have control of its own resources again?
Well, I think first the United States withdrew because I don't think the United States wanted this oil or to benefit from this oil. United States was there because of the Caesar Act, which was like the extreme sanctions on on Syria, and they don't want the Syrian government, the previous Syrian government, to benefit from its oil. So it was very hard to the Syrians and the Syrian government to like ship or to import oil. So that's why the Americans were there, and we know that the oil in Syria is where the American troops are. That's wow,
Yeah, entirely,
like, what
yes.
a coincidence.
Surprise.
So surprise.
And the
So
wheat,
now,
oil and wheat.
now I think their goal has been achieved, unfortunately, and they don't want to stay there. And I think these 50 soldiers will eventually go because, as I said previously, Israel and the United States, they don't like to do anything suddenly. And we saw what happened, for instance, in Afghanistan in 2001 when they withdrew suddenly. What happened? I don't think they will do the same mistake again, especially while Trump is in the office. So that's my thoughts of the American troops in Syria, and I will talk my vision of what's happening in Syria. Maybe Sharmin will disagree. So I think many people are saying that Turkey and Israel are allies in Syria, and I don't think they are currently. I think Bashar al-Assad leaving Syria and the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah created a vacuum in the region, and we have two countries who wanted to jump in and to take advantage of this. Of course, I'm talking about Turkey and Israel, and we are seeing them clashing in Syria. Of course, it's a proxy mini war till now. Turkey wants Syria, and Israel wants Syria. It's obvious, and of course, Israel is using the Alawite card against the current government in Syria, and the Turks are saying that we are the new Ummah, we are the Sunnis, we are the liberators of Palestine. Stand with us and just give Sharia a few years and he will liberate Palestine. I'm not saying this from my imagination. This is written in social media and from Arab influencers on social media. Usually these are aligned with the Qatari and the Turkish
With
view.
Gulf.
Yeah. So I think that's what currently happening in Syria. And let's not forget what France did and will do, I think, in the near future. Now France signed with the Syrian government, and they will take the ports that are on the Mediterranean Sea. And eventually, I think they will be able to extract the oil and gas from the shores of the shores of Syria, because France is one of the few countries that are capable of doing so. I think only 5 or 6 countries in the world that are capable of doing this, and France is one of them. And I think the West and the French and the Europeans, they don't want stability in Syria. Let the government stay weak. We made our deal. I think clashes will remain in the south, and I think Turkey will try to maintain Syria as a country, because also we know that Erdogan and Turkey, they don't like the Kurds, and they have like historic fear of the Kurds, and I don't think they want the Druze to have their own country or to be joined to Israel, because this also will encourage the Kurds in Syria to maybe join the Iraqi Kurdistan, or to announce that they want their own country, and this is very dangerous for Turkey. So I really believe that both countries, Israel and Turkey, are clashing in Syria currently, and of course Sharia.
But here's something interesting, Karim. Let me just
Yes,
jump in, because earlier today, Israel accuses Turkey of helping rearm Hezbollah by sending plane loads full of cash. So, we've been hearing over the past several weeks about how there were fears of exactly what you're talking about, a proxy war between Turkey and Israel. Are they going to fight in Syria? And now Israel is making these claims that Turkey is helping Hezbollah by sending them money or by allowing money to arrive to Lebanon, even though we know, first of all, that Turkey and Israel are aligned in many topics. So it's like, this is like Israel really just like crying wolf. And second of all, the restrictions that are currently imposed in Lebanon's airport, in Beirut, in Rafik Hariri airport, how are planes full of cash arriving when you have like even the bags that are coming from Iraq or from Turkey are being like checked down to the bare minimum,
Not,
to the maximum, and now they make these claims.
not, I just want to add something that of what you said. It's not only cash. Now the American government asked the Lebanese government to check the Binance app. If somebody wants to go and
Oh
collect
wow!
money, yeah, he has to provide all the information and tell them from where he got the money and how he made the money. So the Americans penetrated the Lebanese system to an extent. Yani it's crazy. And the very part that the Binance app that we use in Lebanon does not exist in the United States. They have something else. They have like US Binance or whatever. And of course, the Lebanese government said them okay. Yeah, within
Anything.
in less than 24 hours, they gave them okay. Maybe our minister just checked. He told somebody, "What's this?" They told them it's money. It's an application. Oh, okay, tell them okay. We will do it. We will do it. So I think it's that simple. Unfortunately, in my country, they will tell okay to anything that France and the Americans
It comes from the
says.
US.
I'm not saying that Israel will bomb Turkey and Turkey will bomb Israel. They will use their proxies. Currently, Israel is benefiting of what's happening in the Druze areas to angst southern of Syria, and Turkey is fighting bad, or not fighting bad. Turkey is like pumping this propaganda that Sharia is very good, and these are people that are not under the law, and these people are remnants of. Today, I just read it in a Turkish newspaper that these are remnants of fighters that fought Assad back in 2016, and they are still in their resort, and nobody touched them, and suddenly you know what I mean. We'll see many of these things, but I'm convinced that Turkey, they don't want to divide Syria, and of course Israel wants to divide Syria so they can take more land, and they will keep on clashing.
What do you think, Sharmin, about Ahmad al-Shara getting his house bombed by the Israelis and the lack of reaction to this?
I think it's just theater, to be honest. I mean, one of the things I can say going into this discussion is that both Turkey and Shara, the HTS president of Syria, have declared numerous times that they aim to keep Syria whole. Syria should remain whole. However, let's break this down a bit. HTS, the Nusra Front, Al Qaeda,
Whatever you want to call it,
aka
yeah.
Ahmad al Shara, is a Salafist extremist. Okay, these guys, they don't think in terms of the nation state. The nation state means nothing to them. They think in terms of caliphates. Okay, for a caliphate, all you need is a seat of power, right? A seat of power could be Damascus, could be anywhere. And from there, your armies go and conquer. They go forth and conquer. Borders don't matter. Okay. So why would, um, Islamist Erdogan and Islamist Shara be the ones voicing most concern about the territorial integrity of the Syrian state? It's just, it's a joke. I think in action too, we can see that Shara did absolutely nothing when the Israelis entered the south of Lebanon, sorry, the south of Syria, and took whatever they wanted and bombing whatever they wanted. They can make the excuse that we're not able to fight the Israelis right now. We're consolidating our nation. We'll get to that later. But in fact, they were fine fighting all of Syria, Iran, Russia, so that's a lame argument. I feel like both Shara and Erdogan, they don't really care about the territorial integrity of Syria. That in fact, what suits Erdogan specifically, like the Israelis and like the Americans, would be a fundamental weakening of the state. And what better way to do that than to create, hard lines within the states, right? And what would those hard lines be? Just north, south, east, west? No, they're areas where certain minorities, live. And so in the south, you have a big Druze minority on the west coast, right? On the coastal area, you have the Alawi minority, and then in the northeast, you have the Kurdish minority. Now, I know Karim says Turkey doesn't like the Kurds, but Turkey loves the Barzani Kurds in the KRG. Yeah, yeah. So it's not. It's really, you know, if you're happy to play the Western NATO finance capitalism, you know, quasi-imperialist game, you're good. It doesn't matter if you're the other color. You're on the same side. So I think basically Turkey expects to, you know, to take whatever bits of northern Syria it wants, because it actually views them as southern Turkey, okay? Like Aleppo, for instance, right? And then, you know, the Israelis can, as far as they're concerned, take the south. Now, it's not a good look for Turkey, so they can rant on about the Israeli aggression, etc., because it's popular rhetoric with the Muslim and Arab and Turkish masses. But in actual fact, let's look at what just happened 2 weeks ago. The Turks and the Israelis went to Azerbaijan, okay, to meet to discuss Syria. And you think they were there talking about territorial integrity? They were there talking about deconfliction. What does deconfliction mean? It means, okay, don't cross our lines and we won't cross yours. In other words, a de facto recognition by Israel of Turkey's role in the north, a de facto recognition by Turkey of Israel's role in the south of Syria. Those guys are same side right now. They may clash over things. The Israelis don't want Turkey to have the upper hand all throughout Syria and to be able to sway the Syrian spirit. The Turks don't want the Israelis to get their teeth into southern Syria and change borders around that would not be advantageous to Turkey and its regional interests, right? The Turks ultimately don't want the Israelis really there, but they don't care because they would like to carve out bits of Syria for themselves, and vice versa. So I think they're more same side than anything else, but they may get territorial and confrontational, though no war, because they are the same side ultimately. NATO, U.S., unipolar worlds. They may get confrontational when their near interests are threatened in any way in Syria. And as far as I'm concerned, Ahmad al-Shara is there to allow the unfolding of this project because he is absolutely a beast, a creation of the Saudi slash, I mean, you know, sort of the Wahhabi, Salafi, CIA, US State Department project slash Israeli project, because we know, and I know personally from sitting on the borders of the very small border between Lebanon, Syria, and occupied Palestine during the Syrian war, and in the village of Beit Jin, that the Israelis were paying al-Nusra salaries. Al-Nusra is the precursor to HTS, which is the group that
the current government
leads.
Yeah.
They were paying $200,000 a month in salaries to the HTS fighters in that region until the Syrian army came in and Nusra abandoned and headed to Idlib. So I know the direct linkage between Israel and HTS.
I want to mention something, Sharbini. You said that they met in Azerbaijan, but when the talks ended, the Turkish government didn't give the green light to the Israeli plane to use the Turkish airspace, and they had to like do a long route. That means that the talks were not good. And 2 days ago,
No, it doesn't. That could be theater. You know, there's a chance. Listen, if something like this really happened, there's no need for them to talk about it. If they put it out in public, it's a stance. I mean, I'm not saying that's entirely wrong. I'm not saying they're best friends. I'm saying they're the same side, okay, on Syria. but they have their own selfish interests, and if they clash on those, then we'll see some.
And also 2 days ago, Netanyahu was going to Azerbaijan. He canceled his official trip because, according to Hebrew media, Turkey refused to give the green light to the Wing of
For the
Zion, which
plane.
is the presidential airplane of Israel, to pass through its airspace. I understand their propaganda and the theater, but after what happened in the region, I don't think the Arabs need theater. Israel and Turkey can do whatever they want without theater. That's my opinion.
Well, in any case, I want us to before we end this episode for this week. I really want us to discuss one last item, which is something that broke this morning, and that is the Palestinian Authority's president upcoming visit to Lebanon, which is surprisingly going to coincide. Well, surprisingly, going to coincide with Donald Trump's Gulf tour. What is Mahmoud Abbas going to do in Lebanon? At the Saudi request, he's going to call on all Palestinian factions to disarm, to hand over their weapons to the army. And more interestingly, according to Middle East Eye, who broke this news, if these groups refuse, a military operation will target those who defy the Lebanese state's disarmament order. So Mahmoud Abbas is being jetted over to Beirut to be the face of a disarmament plan that could very well descend into violence. We know the Palestinian factions in the camps are very well armed. You know, he's going to call for Fatah factions, that's what they're saying, right? And in the hopes that this is going to spread. Do you guys think this is going to work? Do you guys think this is just simply, going to set off a powder keg?
The idea that the doddering Mahmoud Abbas is coming to Lebanon to disarm the camps is also theater, because he's a doddering fool. I mean, will they even let him in the camps unless he's super protected by Fatah fighters, you know? And then the Lebanese government, which has Karim, I'm sure you know the details better than I, but they have a very clear understanding that the Lebanese army is never to enter Palestinian camps. And Palestinian camps never have to fear the Lebanese army, right? The Lebanese army is going to disarm them. Remember the Nahr al-Bared fights? Like, do we want something like this again? Look at how these Arabs, okay, the Arab Joseph Aoun and the Arab Mahmoud Abbas, okay, are doing Israel's work in Lebanon. It's so disgusting. I don't know if Mahmoud Abbas or Mohammed bin Zayed is worse. I don't actually know. Maybe Mohammed bin Zayed, because he can like snap fingers and get more dangerous stuff happening. And the Israelis actually respect his money. Mahmoud Abbas is scornfully disgusting. He lives right there in the West Bank. I don't know how he's safe. And Joseph Aoun is fast turning into an absolute, the egghead that he looks like. I can't that the Lebanese army at this time, when they're being occupied by Israel, want to go disarm Palestinian camps, which is mostly not full of fighters. You see little groups of fighters because there's factions in the Palestinian body politic, right? PFLP, PFLP-GC, DFLP, Fatah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, they're factions. They have their little armed guards, right? The Palestinian camps are largely homes, aka hovels, for Palestinian refugees who have lived in purgatory limbo for decades as Arabs sought to dismiss that problem, in exchange for purchasing U.S. Military hardware. So that's the Lebanese army. What their special forces, their U.S. trained special forces are going to enter these camps. I'd love to see them in Ain al-Halwa. I'd love to see them in Ain al-Halwa. Really, really.
How's that going to work out?
No, I can't actually imagine. And they're bringing Mahmoud Abbas, who looks so strong and threatening,
But they want the legitimacy.
They want the legitimacy of the least legitimate Palestinian leader ever to walk the face of this earth. Ever. Okay? Single digits. And that's probably because they've stuffed the ballot boxes. Like, they're bringing Mahmoud, they're bringing the cadaver, okay, over to Lebanon to announce that I can't wait to get back to Lebanon. When is he arriving? I just want to.
Let me check. Well, Karim, go ahead in the meantime.
Yeah, I just want to say what Sharmin said is absolutely true. The Lebanese army and the Lebanese government, they don't have the knowledge or the capacity or the training or the weapons even to do any operation.
No, it's not even that. They don't have the right. Legally, they don't have the right to enter the camps. This was an agreement between the camps.
This was an agreement.
And
so yeah, I
mean, the one camp that they did this with became a huge outrage in Lebanon. It was a fiasco. And that was one camp. They're going to do this way. And some of these camps are in Beirut. Some of them are in Beirut. And you know, people, Beirutis live, you know, these camps in Beirut are more like neighborhoods. It's not like they're fenced in or anything like that. Sabra Shatila, the Lebanese army is going to march into Sabra Shatila. Oh my days. Wait, when is this happening? When is
19 May.
Oh, I'll be back.
Karim, finish your thought.
Yeah, I want to say first, just to clarify, what Sharmin is talking about is that is dated back to Nahr al-Barid in Tripoli, 2009, and there was like a group that used to go and steal from there. That's why there was an operation. If the Lebanese army did clash with the Palestinian resistance in Nahr al-Barid. Now what they are trying to do or to portray to people that they are capable and they want to remove all the weapons that are against Israel. They don't say it, but that's what they are doing.
That is
even
what
if
doing, yes.
if it's between the hands of Palestinians or between the hands of the Lebanese resistance. I think if they want to do that, thousands will die. Palestinians won't handle their weapons, and they are creating a problem that doesn't exist. Currently, nobody is talking about the Palestinians. Palestinian weapons inside the refugee camps except Israel. And the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people, they are not suffering from this. Zero.
Yeah. But it's become the hottest issue right now.
And I think there's a piece of information that we missed and think is very important. And maybe you wrote about it, Esteban, because we are outside and we didn't have much time to read all the news. Is about that Syria closed all the Lebanese, all the Palestinian, resistance. If you can just give us short information about this.
No, they've been arresting. They've been arresting the Palestinian leaders. The last one they did was the leader of the PFLP-GC. They arrested him. They arrested some Palestinian Islamic Jihad leaders. They've ordered, right? And this is the order of the U.S. This is at the request of the United States. The Syrian security forces, which are, conducting a mass killing campaign in the coast and trying to do the same with the Druze, are also shutting down and arresting Palestinian leaders in Syria because, as you said, and you said it perfectly, Karim, this is them doing the work of the Israelis for the benefit of Israel, of the occupation entity, so they can continue with their genocide. But the only thing I wanted to add about this Mahmoud Abbas visit is this is the prelude to whatever the plan is to disarm Hezbollah. Whatever happens with the Palestinian camps is just going to be a preview of whatever the intention is down the line, because that's the actual request from the U.S., from Israel. They are holding up reconstruction funds for Lebanon. They are, threatening the airport every so often. They just bombed Akhe. Remember last week we were discussing this. They just again bombed Akhe. So there is two guns, right, at the head of the Lebanese government. And they're essentially being marched first into the Palestinian camps and then to Hezbollah. So I think we can leave these topics there for now. This is obviously stuff that is going to continue to develop. And I'm sure next week we're going to be talking about how Donald Trump, went back to diplomacy, maybe. If we're all lucky, or just decided to do some other knee-jerk decision as he does.
But before we go... I would say some of the smarter analysts I'm meeting here too are also saying this. Like, they're asking us, okay, visiting journalists and analysts, whatever. What do you think about this? What do you think about the negotiations? What do you think about war? What do you think about Gaza? And we're literally all, everything is so fluid. Everything is so fluid. That is literally, our podcast can change from week to week. There's no predicting, because not only do you have, the leader of the unipolar world that's collapsing, right? In a very unpredictable figure, right? So Trump, but you have like the crazy Netanyahu, right? In this region. You have the Chinese, the Russian war with Ukraine, the Chinese-U.S. battle, right? The change in the shift in global networks, financial center that we've often talked about, the Cradle. You have, I mean, any event can trigger anything right now. So it's hard to predict. But for sure, people here in Iran were very interested in the nuclear talks, whether we thought they had any legs. And really, I think most people here as well as outside thought it's a toss of the coin. Like, don't even invest that much into these talks because you can't take the Americans seriously. You can't take Trump seriously.
You can't.
You just go along with it because that's what diplomats do. And you see, there might come a time where the U.S. is cornered, that Trump is suddenly facing acrimony from the Chinese and the Russians in a big way and decides, oh, let me make a deal with Iran to get a foreign policy win, right? The flip, the exact opposite could happen. So it's very fluid. That is the takeaway from our trip to Iran. And I think this week's events in West Asia in general.
Yeah. So before we go, Charmaine, you promised us some interesting trip stories between you and Karim from Iran. I'm sure the commenters would love to hear about those.
Well, I can't I mean, first of all, Karim is going to be embarrassed because, I said to him, like, it's just going to make you look like a Yahoo, but you're not. He's not. Okay? He really isn't. Karim knows.
He's a man of the world.
He knows about more things than almost anyone, certainly his age, I've ever met. Okay. Wait, now let me not give him that because he's just going to start strutting. But really, so we're driving. He and I were in the same car driving from the airport in the middle of the night to the hotel in northern Tehran. And all of a sudden, like 1:30 a.m., he suddenly leaps out of his seat. And I'm like, what happened? What happened? Because every time I go to come to Tehran, something weird happens. It's like Raisi died once. ISIS attacked parliament the next time. Rafsanjani died.
Wow.
So when Karim jumped out of his seat,
you thought
and it
something
turned
had happened.
out he saw a real live train.
Oh, that's so
So
cool.
I'm like, what do you mean? Like choo-choo train? And he's like, look, he's not a Yahoo. It just so happened that Karim lives in a small Mediterranean country, and his travels have been mostly around the Levant and in the Mediterranean, where there have been no trains. Okay, of course we all see, but do you know what I mean? Like, he literally...
I would have also jumped out of my seat.
You've never seen a train?
Not as many as you would think.
Okay, Karim had never seen one. All right, I thought that was cute as heck. All right, I really did. The other thing that's astonishing me is how much kebab this guy can eat. Okay, there's a general rule. If you know Iranian cuisine or Persian cuisine, our viewers, there's nothing quite like chelo kebab. All right, and for sure, it's the standard fare in almost every restaurant, cafe where they serve food in Iran across the country. But of course, regional areas have their regional dishes. But there's a kebab called kubide. It's like a kafta for the Arabs watching, but juicier and thicker. And Karim can like mainline these, okay? But there's a written, kind of unwritten rule among Persians and people who like Persian cuisine that you could do kubide for like maximum 3 days. Maximum. And then you cannot look at kubide. You cannot think of kubide. You cannot smell kubide. You cannot eat kubide for like maybe another 6 months. You can do 3 days straight. Karim there's no such thing. Kubide breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Oh my God, Sakten.
So we're all like watching, like he's not going to do kubide now. And then he's like, nah, I'll order the kubide. So anyways, we're having a lot of fun here, but I've been here a number of times. I love seeing Tehran through the eyes of my colleague, and fellow podcaster. It's actually made things kind of exciting for me, even though it's hilarious and there are like way worse stories. But I will tell you in private, Esteban, when we see you next.
For sure, for sure. And I hope you guys continue to have fun. I'm very happy for you and congratulations too, because I know we got a couple of awards there in the back. So we'll talk a bit more of those down the line. We want to thank everyone for joining us this week. And again, to remind you to please leave a like, to share, to subscribe, to find us on X and on Telegram. And more importantly, to please check out our Patreon, where you can continue to support the work that we do here at the Cradle. We want to thank you so much for joining us. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmeen Narwani.